It's happened. The bros versus the nerds. A new study has just come out looking at strict reps versus cheat reps. Welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Ryan. I'm an ex-NRL player, online coach, and natural bodybuilder. And this channel is all about how to get jacked. So welcome. As I said, we're going to be discussing this new study that came out. We're going to look at some practical takeaways from the study as well. So it came out late last year. It's actually in preprint, so it hasn't been fully reviewed or anything yet, but still interesting nonetheless. So we'll have a little look through it. Okay, so it compared strict versus cheat reps. Now, the really cool thing about this study that it was in-person design. Okay, so one arm did strict reps and one arm did cheat reps. Okay, so that sort of takes out the genetic difference in different people. So it wasn't like as if one person did strict and one person did cheat. It was actually in the same person, so one arm comparing the other arm, which is really cool. They did 25 untrained individuals. They looked at the dumbbell bicep curl, and then they also looked at the cable tricep push down. And that was done over 2 sessions, and they did 5 sets per session, so 10 working sets across the week. So a pretty decent amount of volume, and obviously good exercise selection for targeting biceps and triceps, which is where they measured. So as I said, muscle hypertrophy, that was the main thing they looked at. They used ultrasound for the measurements, and then they also looked at volume load as well, which is something that we'll talk about. So what were the findings? There was no significant difference, all right? So did the bros win? You know, there's always been talk about cheat reps is just as good and don't have to worry about the pure isolation and the focus and the mind-muscle connection. You just got to lift heavy, bro. So yes, to be honest, I wasn't expecting a different result. I was expecting the same result, to be honest. They took both conditions to failure. You can't really argue with that. Like, failure is such an important thing. I think intensity in which you train the target muscle is definitely the most important thing. And then obviously getting enough volume across the week, which they got enough volume. So they've seen significant amount of muscle growth. So it wasn't too surprised. But I was surprised at something, and that was the volume load. Now, the cheat condition had nearly double. It was actually 80% of volume load over the strict. So technically, they lifted heavier and lifted more and did more reps, but they didn't actually see more growth. So I think almost what the title of this study could be is that cheat reps resulted in more fatigue whilst getting less stimulus or less muscle growth. Now, I will give a few caveats to this study. I don't truly think that that is the key takeaway from this, but it is interesting because if you look at a lot of other studies where an increase in volume load in a certain condition will usually always always result in significant more growth. So to see that there wasn't significant more growth with that much extra volume load, I think goes to show the importance of strict form when it comes to stimulus to fatigue ratio. So pretty much stimulus to fatigue ratio just means the amount of fatigue that you accumulate from a set or a rep, or however you want to look at it, mostly from a set by set basis, the amount of fatigue that you accumulate from that versus the amount of stimulus. Now, you would have to say that because the strict form condition, I suppose you could say, lifted actually less weight and did less reps, then therefore they would have accumulated less fatigue, but they still got the same amount of stimulus. So a really good stimulus to fatigue ratio for the strict. Now, as I said, a little bit more nuanced than that. I don't think that you should throw cheat reps out. I don't think you should close the door on it. At the end of the day, it is only one study, but there is a few caveats that I'm going to walk you guys through. As I said, cheat reps redistribute stress potentially to other muscle groups, so like shoulder and stuff like that, some other surrounding muscle groups that may have received a little bit more tension, whereas the strict is obviously a bit more isolated. So there are a few factors that need to be taken on board. Also, the study used untrained individuals. Now, I like untrained individuals because you are going to see muscle growth, and that is at the end of the day what's the most important thing. There's nothing, could be nothing worse than doing a study and having trained individuals that don't even grow muscle, so got nothing to look at anyway. So I think it was a really good indication of what would actually happen. You know what I mean? So we'd actually get a result, which we got. However, I do think one of the limitations from using untrained is that experienced lifters have a bit more knowledge around how to direct tension. I know from being an online coach and training people face to face for many, many years that if I was to get someone who's a complete newbie in the gym to try and use some loose form and try and say, hey, just focus on the mind muscle connection, make sure you get in the bicep, like it's probably not going to work out too well compared to someone, say, who's been training for 10 years, has a really good understanding of what pump, what tension of the bicep should feel like, and has done that movement over and over again. I just feel like there'd be a lot more reliability to the fact that a more experienced trainee could do a bit more sort of sloppy or cheat reps and be able to still direct tension to the target muscles, to say for the bicep. So I feel like if they did it in trained individuals, you'd probably see a little bit more growth from the cheat reps opposed to the strict, just purely from that sense of, as I said, being able to establish that mind muscle connection and making sure that tension is getting directed to the bicep instead of other areas. So I think that's a massive caveat to take away from this, which is something that I would like to see if they did another study on this, maybe done in trained individuals, just to see what that may look like, what the actual trade-off is for a more trained individual. And the short duration, obviously, was 8 weeks. I don't think this is a massive factor. Obviously, it's quite a short study, but I don't think it's a massive factor. We've seen decent muscle growth from both conditions, so I think it's enough there to compare. Maybe if you extrapolate it out, you might see a difference, but pretty good, pretty decent. And some practical takeaways. Okay, so enough with the nerd stuff. What does this actually mean to us? Now, for me, I will say my bias is to lean towards strict technique. Okay, so I will say that strict reps should be the foundation of any hypertrophy training. So if you're looking to grow muscle growth, I feel like strict should be majority of your training. However, in saying that, I do think there is place for cheat reps in different programming, and use that certain time strategically can definitely result in more stimulus, or what I believe would be more stimulus. And that is at the end of sets and potentially on the last set. Okay, so say if you're doing the bicep curls, maybe for your last set, at the end of the set, you start to throw a little bit of momentum in just to eke out that little bit of extra stimulus. It's not going to interfere with your later sets because it's the last set, so it's not going to interfere with any up and coming sets. So it's something to just get a little bit more stimulus out of an already sort of fatigued muscle, again, which is not going to interfere with any upcoming sets. And then I think at the end of a training block can be a good one as well. And actually, just to touch on the last point, I'm not too sure how they performed the cheat reps. So I'm not too sure whether they actually went cheat reps from the start, or they went strict and then started to use cheat reps as they fatigued. I feel like if they used strict at the start and then actually started to throw a little bit of extra oomph into there and started using momentum a little bit, I feel like that would result in much less fatigue, and a little bit extra stimulus as well, instead of, say, going straight from the get-go. And that's, again, another thing is it's hard to say that an untrained individual would know the difference or know what that feels like. So I think like doing this in untrained individuals would be a little bit different. Say for me, like if I was doing a last set, and at the end of the set I would start off strict, and then as I was starting to fail at a strict technique, I could start to use a little bit of momentum, a little bit of swaying, but I would make sure that eccentric is nice controlled, so I'm really got the tension on the bicep, because as we know, we're always stronger in that eccentric motions. On the way down, you're always going to be stronger, so you're going to be able to perform that strict whilst you need a little bit of extra oomph to get the upward phase of the concentric up. So that's why I feel like beginners wouldn't be able to distinguish that different feel. So that's why I feel like if this was done in trained individuals, you'd probably see a little bit of extra muscle growth, and potentially less fatigue as well. And then towards the end of a training block, so say if you had a deload coming up, you could throw in a little bit more cheat reps in there, because as I said, there's a little bit higher fatigue that comes with doing cheat reps. But I also believe, like as I said, if it was in trained individuals, you'd probably see a little bit more stimulus. So you could probably throw this at the end of a training block, and it doesn't really matter how much fatigue you accumulate, because at the end of the day, you're going to be on a deload next week, and you're going to squash all that fatigue anyway before you go back into training. So that's two scenarios where it could be quite intelligent to add cheat reps in. So yeah, I do think there is a place for cheat reps. I don't think it's just close the book on it and throw it out. It is only one study, but that's my sort of takeaway from this, of how I sort of would have used cheat reps in the real world. And then I think at the end of the day, you need to prioritize stimulus to fatigue ratio. If you feel like strict gives you a great amount of stimulus, then I would be obviously leaning towards that way. However, I do recognize that there is a lot of people who just love doing cheat reps, you know what I mean? And not even really cheat reps. I don't really like that term. Obviously, they used it to get some more eyeballs on the study, and it works really well. And I'm using it in my thumbnail and at the start of the video and stuff like that to get your guys' attention. But I just think a little bit loose reps. Some people just like to go a little bit looser, use a bit of spirit energy, you know what I mean? Whether you're lifting with a training partner and it's a Friday night, like to get the guns out, get in the singlet. I think that's great, because at the end of the day, the main reason to reduce fatigue is to make sure you don't burn out. But enjoyment has to be factored into that as well. So if you're someone who enjoys it, even if you accumulate a little bit extra fatigue, I feel like that's going to nullify itself. So if you're someone who's like doesn't really like strict reps, and you find it boring and it sucks and you feel like a nerd, then you're not going to stick at it for very long anyway. So I don't feel like that is like a stimulus to fatigue trade-off in a sense. You're not going to stick at it, so why are you worried about fatigue? So I feel like there has to be a little bit of personalization when it comes to these things. And if you're someone who likes a bit of loosey goosey and likes to use that spirit energy, then go for it. It doesn't seem to result in less muscle growth. We know that from this study. So I think crack on. If that's something that you enjoy, then yeah, crack on with it. But I think the big takeaway from doing strict reps, and the reason why I use strict reps, is standardization. Now, this is the main reason why I am such a big proponent of strict reps, and that is because whatever progression that I want to make sure that progression comes from getting the target muscle stronger and bigger. So if I'm doing a barbell bench press, I want to know that if I'm able to get an extra rep, or if I'm able to increase the weight, it is because my chest is getting bigger, my chest is getting stronger, not from me like shortening the range of motion or bouncing off the chest or using momentum to get the bar up. Like that doesn't mean anything to me. I would rather make sure that I keep my reps nice and standardized. So like if I do a little pause at the bottom, try to make sure that I'm pushing off with the chest, not using other momentum, because that is a good indication that I'm actually getting stronger and my program is working. What I'm doing is working. So that is the most important thing for me, and something that I sort of preach to my clients as well is like it's such a good tool to be able to use progression to make sure that like what you are doing is actually working. So if you're progressing and getting stronger, but your reps are standardized and your reps look exactly the same, it's hard to really argue that you're not progressing, because what else is lifting the weight? What else is making you get extra reps? What else is causing you to be able to lift an extra 10 kilos? It has to be added muscle. So I think that's something that needs to be taken into account when you're looking at what type of like standardization, what your reps look like from week to week and sets look like from week to week. So I think that's something to take into account as well. And I just think further research needs to be done cheat reps in trained individuals, as I sort of spoke about before. So final thoughts to sort of round this off, I think quality over quantity should definitely be something that is looked at in resistance training. I've never really met someone or coached someone who's not doing enough volume, but I've met plenty of people that aren't doing a lot of enough quality volume, and whether that be from the fact of just not having enough intensity, not bringing it close enough to failure. Maybe they're a little bit too loosey goosey with their form, and maybe pulling up pre-failure or whatever the case may be, or not actually taking the target muscle to failure. They're just stopping because it kind of feels hard. And I think they're the main reasons why people aren't growing. I don't necessarily think it's because you're not doing enough volume. I've never really, as I said, I've never really met someone that's not doing enough. Just their quality is not good enough. And then I think strict form should still be your main approach, even if you're someone who likes to use cheat reps. As I said, standardization is a massive thing. So maybe you do your first set nice and strict and standardized to make sure that that first set continues to progress. And usually it should be a good indication because you're not as fatigued. You should be fresh. So maybe that's something where you're a bit stricter with that, and then as you go, you can be a bit more loosey goosey. And then, as I said, yeah, adding strategically in. And as I said, further research just needs to be done on this in advanced lifters. And I think it would be cool to see in multi-joint exercises as well. This being an isolation exercise like biceps and tricep push down, not very fatiguing in itself. So maybe something like a barbell bent over row would be interesting to see the results from that, as it being a more fatiguing exercise. So I would be the believer that you would accumulate a lot more fatigue by doing sort of more cheat reps. Maybe that results in more muscle growth. Probably would if it was a trained individual to understand. So yeah, a few different things that I would like to see before. As I said, no one's closing the book on cheat reps. I still think there's a place for it, and I think if anything, it encourages it more, because if that's something that you like and it's your spirit energy to as I said, get the tank top out Friday night with the boys, getting it done. I feel like you're not going to lose anything by doing it. You're not going to lose anything by getting a bit loosey goosey with it. So give it a crack, see how it goes. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, guys. As always, like, subscribe, share, do all those good things. Support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.